Welcome to the second meeting of the Senate Standing Committee on Education. I'd like to welcome everyone this morning. Before we do begin, we have one of our members of the committee, Alice Forgy Kerr, whose brother Larry Forgy passed away through the evening, and so we would just like to take a moment of silence. Both sides of the aisle, Republican, Democrat, know how much of a legend Larry Forgy was in Kentucky politics, and for our friend Alice Forgy Kerr, who's going through some difficult times right now, we just please ask that everyone please provide a moment of silence for the Forgy family. Thank you all. Mariah, if you would, please call the roll.
Senator Carroll, Senator Givens, Senator Harper Angel, Senator Higdon, here. Senator Kerr, Senator Meredith, here. Senator Neal, here. Senator Southworth,
here.
Senator Stivers, here. Senator Thomas, Senator Wilson,
here.
Senator West, here. Chair Wythe.
Here. Thank you so much. We do have a quorum of duly constituted to do business this morning. I would ask all members and those in the audience this morning, if you do have a cell phone, please turn that to silence or vibrate so there's no disruptions during the meeting time. Any members have any introductions this morning of any special guest with us? Seeing none, we do have one bill on the agenda for today for consideration. I would like to ask Senator Steve West if he would make his way to the table, and any other guests that may be with him to testify in support of the bill. Members, there is not a committee sub on this bill, but there is a physical note that is in your folders if you wish to look at that, as well as the bill in and of itself. And so, Senator West, you have the floor, my friend.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm Senator Steve West, 27th District.
Amanda Ellis, I represent the Council on Post-Secondary Education.
And Mickey Ray, Chief Academic Officer at the Kentucky Department of
Please
Education.
make sure microphones are all on. Thank you.
What you have before you, members of the committee, is Senate Bill 9. You've passed this bill before, or a version of this bill before. This is called the Read to Succeed Act. And we truly feel that if this is implemented, it can be a game changer for Kentucky students. The genesis of this bill was a SREB conference a few years ago that Representative Tipton and myself attended, along with several members of the committee here today. We heard really good presentation and ideas on early literacy and learned that if an education system can make sure that a kid is reading on level by third grade, that those early investments can yield exponential results. So Representative Tipton and myself, we came back to Kentucky. We were both thinking the same thing at the same time, but we hadn't communicated. We were on different tracks, and we were going to see what is Kentucky doing in this area. So we found that the bulk of the work in Kentucky was being done by the Read to Achieve program. The Read to Achieve program is a great program. The teachers in the program do great work. However, there are not enough Read to Achieve teachers to go around. So once Representative Tipton and myself realized that we were working on the same initiative, we joined forces. We reached out to KDE and others, and we have been working on this bill approximately 3 to 4 years. We've been working with Amanda, who was at KDE at the time. She's now with CPE. And Mickey, who is with KDE now, was at that time. And then numerous other K groups, the Pritchard Committee, the Chamber of Commerce, all the stakeholders in this area. The version you have before you, like I said, is probably version 4. And this bill is modeled after a Mississippi initiative that was passed in 2013. Normally, we wouldn't want to follow in the steps of Mississippi when it comes to education, but they have made tremendous gains in progress in this area. Mississippi, between 2017 and 2019, was first in the United States in learning gains for fourth grade reading, and as a side benefit to the act, has been that they have seen tremendous gains in math scores. And I think some of the Mickey will get into it a little bit, but I think the most recent data shows that they're the only state in the United States to see significant gains in this area. In Kentucky, districts apply for RTA grants. If you're lucky enough to receive one of these grants, you will have an RTA teacher in your school, and the children are sent to that school for early intervention and helps. That program currently reaches around 10,820 students. My math may be a little off. It's in the 10,000 range. We really need to be reaching around 200,000 kids. Out of 693 Kentucky schools, 139 are considered novice. Of those schools, only 47 schools are receiving RTA grants. So 92 of the lowest performing schools, the schools that need these grants the most, receive zero help in this area. Two key things the bill does: it provides help to all 200,000 students, and it sets in place a new high-quality professional development program that focuses on early literacy. This bill passed this committee last year. This bill before you today is a different version of that bill. There has been significant changes. So if last year you had a problem with how the bill affected the RTA program, then you should be more than pleased with this version. We've made significant changes. Last year's version repurposed $15 million of RTA funds and reallocated those funds into the coaching model, and it was my hope to add $3 to $6 million to that number in general funds to get that investment up to $18 to $21 million. This bill, let me be clear, this bill does not touch the $15 million that is currently allocated to RTA. That program stays in place, and this bill does not touch that money and affects the RTA program very little. This program, this would be the Read to Succeed program, would be a separate standalone program from RTA. And it would be based on the Mississippi coaching model, which has been tremendously successful. Mickey will get into the funding a little bit more, but in essence, what we will be asking for, if this bill passes, this is the framework. I've already requested $22 million in this budget for this program. That would be the money to set the program up. You have in your packets a fiscal note. After implementation a couple years from now, it would cost the state approximately $15 million per year. That's a $30 million investment in the biennium, but that would totally depend on the number of coaches that are able to be hired in the next 2 years. And it totally depends on the coaching numbers. So that number could be lower based on the number, how successful and how well KDE is able to attract coaches. There is another possibility. I'll put Mickey on the hot seat for this question, but there's a possibility that KDE would avail itself of providing $10 million in ARPA funds the first year in this space. So that would save the general fund $10 million, and we could get the program up and running. I want to address two things because I know these are going to be questions as it affects RTA. Early intervention, like I said, $15 million, RTA funds not affected. This bill is a standalone program, its own program. It's a coaching model separate from RTA. In this bill, the steering committee that advises KDE on early literacy is changed. The makeup of that committee is changed. The reason we had to change that is the steering committee will now cover both programs. So in the past, it was covering RTA, and now it would be covering both RTA and Read to Succeed. And if you're concerned about RTA, it's really better for RTA because instead of having the possibility of 4 RTA teachers on the steering committee, this bill specifically adds an RTA teacher and early interventionists and adds early intervention language into the teacher portion, which theoretically, under the current situation, you could have 0 RTA teachers on the steering committee. Under my bill, you could theoretically have 5 RTA teachers on the steering committee. The purpose of the change to the steering committee is to get more boots on the ground information to KDE. So the steering committee would be made up more teachers, interventionists, and others who are in the school system every day working on this issue. And I look at it, the analogy that I came up with was if you're a general in battle and you need intelligence, you don't ask another general what's going on. You want to get information from the frontline soldiers, the privates, the sergeants, the people that are on the front lines. You want good information back to the top so you can make wise decisions. So that's that, and then I'll just turn it over to Mickey at this time.
All right, thank you. Thank you, Chair Wise, and want to thank Vice Chair West as well and members of the committee. Today, I am very happy to be here to discuss Senate Bill 9, the Read to Succeed Act. And I'd like to begin by addressing why early literacy should be a focus. And I typically acknowledge that I don't like to have a deficit mindset, but we cannot allow ourselves to become numb to this data. I know that it is data that you have seen in previous sessions, but behind the numbers, there are students in Kentucky classrooms. So there's a very real human aspect to this, and I think there should be an urgency that we all have to address student need, great student need. And the data is alarming. But we also know that this need for accelerated learning in reading has been compounded by the COVID-19 pandemic. So what you're looking at on this slide, you have K-Prep rating for educational progress results for grade 3 reading from 2015 through 2019. And it reveals that approximately 50% of students are performing below proficiency each year on that grade reading assessment. And so what that means is that over the past 5 years, approximately 118,000 Kentucky students in grade 3 were not proficient readers. And while there is an academic aspect to that, there's also a very real human aspect to this because that impacts their long-term success. And research indicates that students not reading proficiently by the end of 3rd grade are 4 times more likely to not finish high school. So there truly is not only an educational imperative to this, but I believe, and we would argue, that there is a moral imperative to this issue as well. On the next slide, you'll see that we're also taking a look at some national measures. So the National Assessment of Educational Progress state data for the Kentucky School Report Card has revealed a downward trend continuing into grade 4. Based on 2018 and 2019 data, Kentucky ranked 23rd in the nation. And a third of Kentucky students scored below basic on grade 4 reading assessment. And if you look at the map, so Kentucky is one of 17 states that had a score decrease between 2017 and 2019. And as Senator West mentioned, there's one state who showed growth and made score increases during that time period, and that is Mississippi. And again, the Read to Succeed Act models some of the statewide supports that we see evident in Mississippi. And the other thing I would like to mention is that, the Mississippi legislature invested a significant amount of funds into the statewide professional learning and that job-embedded coaching model that you see reflected in Senator West's bill. And the act takes many comprehensive actions to improve early literacy outcomes from the very beginning. So it is a first step in really increasing the student outcomes across our state for our youngest readers. And to Senator West's point, if you look at that first bullet, it maintains the Read to Achieve grant. So it allows for the Read to Achieve grant to be fully funded. No funding is reprioritized or repurposed within this bill. And again, historically, the grant has served approximately 5% of Kentucky's 200,000 K through 3 students. So that's about 10,000 students on average per year. And according to the UK Evaluation Center's report, the RTA annual reports that come out each year, RTA interventionists report serving 33 to 46 K through 3 students per year. And these one-on-one and small group interventions are critical. They are critical for those students needing the most intensive interventions. But the goal of Senate Bill 9 is to expand the support provided in combination with the Read to Achieve grant to target 100% of K through 3 students who will be receiving Tier 1 instruction. So RTA, the grant, focuses on a very specific student population, 13 to 20% of students who are receiving both Tier 3 and Tier 2 interventions. The goal of the remaining portion of this bill, the Read to Succeed Fund, is to target 100% of those students who are receiving Tier 1 instruction across classrooms within our state. So that's a key difference. And some people often ask, well, why not just expand RTA? Why not just expand the grant? And that's an excellent question. But simply expanding the grant is not the answer because, again, the grant is designed to meet the needs of the 13 to 20% of students needing those intensive interventions. And this is not enough, and we see that in our data. This is not enough to address the 50% of third grade students who are routinely scoring below proficient on the grade 3 reading assessment. Thus, the bill utilizes both RTA in its current form, but also targets more students and more teachers and more comprehensive actions. And those comprehensive actions fall into the remaining categories you see on the slide: early intervention and instruction, reading improvement plans for students, family and community engagement, and teacher certification. So now we're going to take just a walk through the sections of the bill and the amendments that have been made. So in Section 1, and this is the legislative findings and intent regarding reading, it clarifies the intent of the General Assembly for elementary students in providing comprehensive school-wide reading instruction aligned to the Kentucky Academic Standards for Reading and Writing, providing a multi-tiered system of supports to support and engage all students in learning to read, ensuring highly effective instruction and intervention provided by the most qualified individuals, and implementing evidence-based reading instruction in the 5 key areas of phonemic awareness, phonics, fluency, vocabulary, and comprehension. It also establishes that the Kentucky Department of Education will collaborate with new partners to support schools and districts in this work. Section 2 amends KRS 158.305, and this is the existing response to intervention statute. And we know that this process is already in place in varying degrees throughout the state, and the amended language serves to clarify the process for developing and overseeing the progress of an individual student reading improvement plan. It also establishes the selection of and training on the administration and use of universal screeners in diagnostic assessments. And these are not additional tests that are woven within the bill. These are existing practices, and it allows us the opportunity to provide further guidance and support to schools and districts around this particular area. And then lastly, it engages parents and families early and often in the discussion to promote student success and to ensure that parents and families are involved in the decision making. It also provides information to families to promote literacy at home. Section 3 is a new section of KRS 164, and it requires educator preparation programs for disciplinary early childhood education or elementary education to include evidence-based reading instructional programming and assessment processes and programs. And the intent here is to provide more comprehensive instruction around those 5 key areas that I mentioned earlier. So phonemic awareness, phonics, fluency, vocabulary, and comprehension. It also requires EPSB to maintain a list of approved reading teacher preparation tests to evaluate reading instruction knowledge and skills, and teacher candidates must successfully pass an approved reading instruction test. Section 4 amends KRS 158.840 and requires the Council on Post-Secondary Education to submit a report summarizing teacher preparation program alignment to the instructional requirements that I've mentioned in Section 3. It also requires CPE to report program data to an external evaluator for analysis of progress. In Section 5, we have an amendment to KRS 158.792, and this is the Read to Achieve statute. But again, the grant program remains fully funded, it remains in place, and is intended to target students for support in Tier 2 and Tier 3 interventions. It does include school selection process with a focus on those with most need, and requires the Kentucky Department of Education to report data to an external evaluator for analysis of program success. Section 6 amends KRS 158.794, and this is what Senator West was referencing earlier. It does update the role of the Read to Succeed Council to include more elementary educator representation. And the current makeup of that committee includes more representatives from higher education and members at large. And the amendment allows elementary teachers, interventionists, and elementary administrators to have increased engagement and authentic voice in informing the work both for the Read to Achieve grant and the Read to Succeed Act. Section 7 amends KRS 164.0207, and the Collaborative Center for Literacy Development should advise the Kentucky Board of Education regarding evidence-based comprehensive reading instruction, and CCLD is required to collaborate with the KDE to develop and implement a comprehensive research agenda evaluating comprehensive reading programs and reading intervention programs. And lastly, you have the two new sections. So Section 8 establishes the Read to Succeed Fund. Section 9 establishes the Read to Succeed Act. And the fund is created to train and support educators to improve the reading skills of K through 3 students. It provides statewide professional learning for teachers in reading if funding is appropriated, and creates that literacy coaching program that Senator West mentioned to provide job-embedded support, again, if funding is allocated.
And so to wrap up what Mickey's saying, we've worked on this for several years, and it is absolutely a moral imperative. And coming from the perspective of the Council on Post-Secondary Education and looking at our transition into post-secondary options for our students and our adults in Kentucky, literacy is a non-negotiable. It is an absolute must-have for our students and young adults to be successful as they move into adulthood and into their careers. And the thing that I think is most beneficial that I see is even leading the continuum, the Commonwealth Education Continuum, as we talk about a P20 pipeline and increasing our education pipeline. This is a must. And this has been something we've discussed. This is an area that can also often be a barrier for entrance or advancement into different careers because of a lack of literacy skills that are necessary. And so it's really nice to see this to come to fruition and to continue this journey to move forward with this. And I really appreciate Senator West and Representative Tipton and those who have supported this bill as it has evolved into something that really is workable. And I think that really emphasizing the importance of Tier 1 universal instruction will only enhance the impact of RTA. And I can say that from having lots of years at KDE and working with those folks and being an elementary principal and seeing what RTA can do, but they cannot make magic if solid instruction is going on every single day in the classroom for every child. So thank you for your time.
Just to wrap up, Mr. Chairman, after having said all that, it's really common sense. If a kid cannot learn to read by 3rd grade, it stifles them for the rest of their lives. And we have numbers dealing with prison populations and on and on. So after questions, I would ask for favorable expression of Senate Bill 9.
Senator West, thank you for the bill. Thanks for all your collaboration and your work on this, as well as your colleague in the House, Representative Tipton, who's worked with you side by side. I know we've been in a lot of meetings on this. You've been in meetings with other colleagues on this committee as well as in the House. I want to thank also the 2 presenters that are here for all the work you've done and all the other shareholders and stakeholders that have been a part of this bill. I'm supportive of the bill, and I know you've said this already on the record, and I know it's been commented about the Read to Achieve grant. Mickey, I think you had in the slide, it was Section 5, that they were fully funded. Is there anything going forward with Read to Achieve of anything sunset provision that does away with Read to Achieve, anything of losing jobs with Read to Achieve, just that we can have this on the record and just for direct questioning?
Absolutely. There's nothing in here that does that, nothing whatsoever. And I'll go one step further to say if you're concerned about early literacy in this state, what this bill would do, if fully funded, is you would move, instead of having $15 million in this space, you would eventually have $45 million in this space. Quite the contrary.
Thank you, Senator West. I'm going to go with questions we have from the committee members. Senator Wilson.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and I definitely want to commend Senator West and Representative Tipton for being so tenacious on this bill. I also was at SREB and continue to be a member of that and participate. I believe that they're one of the best that is out there. To see what other states are doing and the successes they have, and I have to say, a lot of people may not know, but I was born in Mississippi and still have a lot of family there. My oldest son there farms next to our family farm on my mother's side down there, and so I'm a regular in seeing what's going on in the state of Mississippi, and to see what they had done in their reading program. And it's interesting to me that in 2013 is when they implemented it, but the successes took about 4 years for them to really observe and move into first place. That's because that they were teaching and training their teachers coming through college how to teach reading to their students at all levels. And that, my friends, I think has made a credible difference. And I love the coaching aspect also established for teachers that are already there, because you're going to be having all teachers really bringing them up to speed. But I think it's going to take a couple of years for us to really start see the successes. This is not an instant overnight, but it is long term. And this is one of the greatest investments I believe that we can make in our children to ensure long-term successes in education. And I wholly support it, and I'm a co-sponsor of the bill, and we see the evidence in the NAEP scores. That's what's incredible to me. So from going from Mississippi being last, and we used to say, thank God for Mississippi, now we're saying, oh, wow, look at Mississippi. So I wholly support it, and I hope all our members will too as well. Thank you very much.
If I could comment, thank you, Senator Wilson, for those words. It's important to point out this bill is not a quick fix either. I mean, it'll take 2 years to set this up, and hopefully we will see some improved results year 3, 4, 5, so it'll take a little time.
Thank you. We have 5 questions left. Members, we do need to be out of the room by 12 o'clock. Next up, Senator Higdon.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Senator West, thank you for your work on this bill. We've had a lot of conversations about this and the concerns that to make sure that Read to Achieve and Read to Succeed could coexist in the same space, and that there's room for both of them. One of my goals is for the Read to Achieve to make sure it survives and thrives. But as you said earlier, it's only 5% of the kids. So if we're going to get to that place where all children can read by the third grade level, we have to do something else, and I know that. And one of the things I was glad to see is as we, you're concerned about whether or not what this bill does to Read to Achieve. The fiscal note, which the the staff looks at that, and the nonpartisan, they just tell you like it is in the fiscal note. They don't pull any punches. And it's good to see in there the measure does not repurpose or reprioritize the RTA grant, and it will continue. That's what it says in the fiscal note. But I do have a question for you, Mr. Chairman.
I expected that you would.
Yeah. Page 22, paragraph C, we strike that. And it's talking about the grant. So could you explain, help me feel more at ease with that paragraph C that's struck on page 22.
What line are you on? I'm sorry.
10? Sub C. Line 10.
Yeah, this, Mickey can comment further, but what I think this does is, like I said before, that we had to change the steering committee because it includes both Read to Achieve and Read to Succeed. The other option, the other way we could have done that is to have two separate steering committees, but in the interest of keeping bureaucracy low, we kept it at one. But I think it has to do with that change to the steering committee, that that they're no longer recommending approval of the grant applications based on those provisions. But if Mickey could chime in.
Sure, I'd be happy to add a little bit to that, Senator Higdon. The way that it currently functions, so when the steering committee meets together, after we have gone through the external evaluation to select the applicants, that comes before the committee and they approve the applicants. So the reality is that was struck. It's a little bit of a redundancy because the committee would never say, no, you have gone through the full evaluation process. These schools should not be awarded the grant. But it still allows the committee to give us feedback on the grant. It's just removing that one very specific action item related to their approval of the grant applicants.
And if I could go further, Mickey, there, if you'll look on page 20 where it sets up the steering committee, currently the steering committee is an advisory committee. Mm-hmm. Okay? It doesn't change that. It's the language is not changed. It's still an advisory committee. So is it safe to say that none of that changes?
Absolutely.
Thank you. I appreciate that.
President Stivers.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. If I could, during Ms. Ray's presentation, you put up, or somebody put up, a statistic, a chart about our performance level over the last couple of years.
K-Prep.
Yeah, and I think it was at 50. Now, I just turned 60, and that's way too small for me.
Sorry.
Yeah, there it is. In doing this and where you are having the success, in 2019, that's 52.7%. Do you know where, or is it possible to get data to show where systems have had better success versus systems that have not? And if you have anything that sticks out in your mind, because generally when you see somebody performing at a 90% level, that one automatically sticks. Somebody performing at a 30% level, you see the extremes on the success curves. But could you provide that for us?
I'd be happy to do
And if you know of anything right now, please tell us what it is.
I would like to add one thing, Senator Stivers. So as part of the RTA annual report and the work that's done with the UK Evaluation Center, for Read to Achieve specifically, they have identified high-performing schools, so what they would denote as outliers, so those that are drastically performing higher than the others. And the interesting thing is that those districts are making choices beyond what is afforded in the grant to do the very things that you will find in the bill. So they are looking for other professional learning opportunities beyond what is afforded via the grant. They have the coaches typically that are functioning within their school buildings. So we actually used what we had seen via those evaluation reports to inform much of our decision making moving forward for both the Read to Achieve grant and also to advise Senator West regarding the bill.
I want to comment on the SREB. It's again, I guess my age again shows. I was on the SREB, and there's actually 3 appointing authorities to the SREB from Kentucky. Speaker of the House gets to appoint, President of the Senate, and the governor. And I was actually Governor Patton's appointee as a Republican senator of the SREB 24 years ago. So I'm very familiar, and I appreciate the work. And anybody who has not been on SREB, and I appreciate the people who I have appointed to be on SREB, that is a really quality group. And I'm very familiar with this because I think Jack Westwood and Vernie McGahey, we were the ones that kind of came back with RTA many, many years ago about how the success of reading at a fourth grade level at the time you finish fourth grade was something that was critical. So I appreciate this group still continuing to be the leaders in moving that expectation. And to the point that Senator West made, I think it was Indiana or Illinois used to project bed space allotment based on what their levels of achievement were at fourth grade reading levels. So this gives an emphasis on how critical this is. And so we need to evaluate and reevaluate what we do to make sure we're attaining this at the fourth grade level. And as we have sat here, my expectations are going to be pretty high about this, because I've actually been texting with a gentleman who said after the passage of the bill, they were at a 64% at-level reading rate, and after 3 years, they went to 92% by just increasing the expectations with minimal investment. And who is this individual I'm texting with right now? Philip Gunn, Speaker of the House, State of Mississippi.
Yeah. If I could comment, Mr. Chairman.
Please.
Thank you for those comments, President Stivers. It's important to point out that these numbers, 2015 to 2019, show a plateau or a decline in Kentucky. The number that's missing is 2020 COVID. We don't even include the COVID numbers, which I suspect should be horrendous. And I bring that up to also include, if you're concerned about achievement gaps, this is the best way, in my opinion, to attack achievement gaps. And I'm assuming the COVID numbers will be bad, and I really feel this is the best way we can attack the achievement gaps and get those numbers up.
Thank you. Senator Neal.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I must say that this is a critical focus. There's no question about that. The research and the observations over the years have been that this has been a critical area in reading. If it's not accomplished by the third grade level, it's a struggle from there on.
Yep.
And ends often in very negative consequences. So I want to thank you, Senator West, for the focus and following through. Also, my observation is this bill is better than the last one, which gives me more of an inclination to support it. There's some things in here, Mr. Chairman, I think that are really important. This evidence-based piece, I think, is essential. I like that. But I have a question, and I think I'm reading this right, but this does not undermine in any way existing programs that are also focused on the same subject matter. Am I correct in that?
That is my opinion. There's really nothing. We purposely changed it this year away from last year's version to keep it separate.
Mr. Chairman, may I? The other thing, I just want to understand, could you elaborate just a little bit on the universal screening piece? I'd like to understand that. What I'm interpreting this as is that each individual child will be assessed in some way to determine where they are, so that they can have, an individualized approach to their circumstances. Is that correct?
Yes, Senator Neal, they already are, but I'll let Mickey or Amanda describe how this changes the current.
Okay. Absolutely. So again, these universal screenings are already happening, and what this does, it puts more of a timeline on when those must occur so that schools can take action to develop the individual reading plan. So they would have the universal screener that would be all students being tested. There would be diagnostic assessments for those individual students to determine more specialized instruction or intervention that would be needed for those students. And then the team would come together to develop that reading plan based on the specific needs of the individual student.
Thank you for that. Mr. Chairman, with your indulgence.
Please proceed.
There are two areas that I do have some questions about, perhaps you can help me with. The training aspect. There's a ton of training requirements now on the ground for those who would have to carry this out. And I noticed that historically we keep adding things on, but I'm not sure there's a relief valve on the other side, or whether there should be. I really don't know. So I'm just concerned. Well, I shouldn't say concerned. I'm wondering about this training piece, this additional training piece. How does this impact, if you can state it in this, in here, how does this impact the existing load of training requirements for those on the ground, teachers namely?
I'm
Go
sorry,
ahead.
Senator West.
Go ahead.
So one thing that I do want to point out, so the schools local schools would make decisions on whether or not at the beginning they're going to opt into the additional professional learning requirements. So they could consider that in their total 24 hours for those K through 3 teachers or K through 5 teachers if they so choose. And then they'll have local flexibility determine how to implement those additional hours. Much of what we do at the agency, we would be providing free professional learning that they could opt into, so they would be able to apply to participate. So there would also be a matter of choice on the teacher's part. So they would have to evaluate where they are, their time and space and capacity. And we think that as more and more teachers are able to participate in the professional learning supports, it will cause other teachers to also want to participate because of just the word that would spread within a school building, within a grade level team, within a PLC, to support students in classrooms with diverse needs.
So this is not a mandate.
It would not be. The professional learning piece would be an opportunity that's available for teachers to apply to participate, because it has to be released in phases, and that's part of the onboarding. It would take more than 1 year to provide the professional learning supports for the entire teacher population.
Last question, Mr. Chairman, I promise.
Please
Senator Neal, if I could
And I
jump
do-
in.
I'm sorry.
Senator Neal over here.
Yes, please.
If I could jump in real quick, just to be clear about your mandate question, because I know you like language and you want us to be precise. So once the school is in, you have to follow the parameters of the program. So it's
But you opt in.
yeah.
Is that correct?
Yep.
Okay. This is my last. The other area that I had maybe need some enlightening in is the standardized testing aspect. How does that apply? And the reason I raised the question is because standardized testing that's used to evaluate students, there's a controversy, in fact, an observation that it really does not necessarily, it's important, but it does not necessarily in and of itself give an assessment that's accurate as it relates to an individual child's accomplishments, their ability to understand, et cetera, et cetera. So I'm just wondering, in the use of standardized testing in this framework, how would that be used? I'm just a little unclear on that.
Mickey, if you could explain how it doesn't expand by that much, current testing requirements.
And that's absolutely right. So there are no additional tests that are incorporated into Senate Bill 9 for students, for K-3 students. What this will do, though, it will ensure, coupled with the intervention support that's happening via the RTA grant, that very intensive intervention support that's occurring with those students, and it will impact Tier 1 instruction, so the actual instructional process of the teacher, versus creating different tests that will be utilized as measures. It's more about equipping the teacher to address the differing needs of the students within the classroom, and that would be incorporated into formative assessments, classroom embedded assessments, and supports for those students, but it's not adding additional K-prep assessments, if that answers the question.
I think it gives me an idea. I'll look further. Senator West, thank you again for the legislation, and Mr. Chairman, thank you for your indulgence.
Yes, sir. Senator Southworth.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I think I have 2 questions and 1 comment if I can go in that order.
Please proceed.
My first question is, we talked about Mississippi, but are there other states that are doing this Read to Succeed program already? Who are they and how long have they been doing it?
Yeah, if you could.
So not really, but if you notice that a couple of states have since passed legislation to mimic very similar Mississippi's approach. So one of those is Alabama. They're trying to move forward with that. There have been other states who have tried things. I know that Arizona actually had a private entity try to take this on to do a reading initiative because they saw the need for it. But no one else has had an intensive, long-term, as Senator Wilson had said, commitment to the process of professional learning. A lot of states, though, are starting to get legislation passed around this. Alabama is the most recent one that I think actually got it passed. And you will notice if you look up Carrie Wright, who is the commissioner, or what they call the superintendent of Mississippi, I think she has talked to over 25 or 30 states who are very interested in their growth and how they're doing that, because Colorado, Massachusetts even, who are very high performers, want to know how they're maintaining the consistent growth, because they haven't really embraced the systems approach to ongoing professional learning and coaching for their teachers. So it is kind of out there on its own, but you're going to see a lot of legislation that's being mimicked and with their own personal touches. And I can even get that information to Mickey, and she and I have talked a lot about that, just looking at different approaches, but specific states for you to see. But no one really has passed anything and implemented like Mississippi has done for literacy.
Okay, thank you. My second question relates more to the funding part of this. And I know that we're not in the Appropriations and Revenue Committee, we're in the Education Committee. But I think, it all ends up tying together. So, the Read to Achieve grant process right now is a allocation, and it's a grant. And this money is going to be another budget line item, it sounds like. And hopefully, we're going to calculate the cost of the program, and that's going to be the cost of it. But most other educational funding, it seems like to me, goes through what we call SEEK. And when we're looking at how much we need, is there a reason why we have all this stuff line itemed instead of, let's say, calculate? I mean, I know if you've got, an IEP student, they're going to get so much. I mean, SEEK formula is complicated, but could there not be one more piece of the SEEK formula? Say, how many Tier 1 students do you have? How many Tier 2 students do you have? And this work in that way?
The reason we did it this way, Senator Southworth, is to target the money and to make sure that the money has to be spent in this area. We have SEEK, that's true, and that flows down to the local districts. But there are many other line items that go directly to KDE for specific things. So this would be another one of those line items. And so the purpose of it being a separate line item and separate is that so the money, we know where it's going, we can keep track of it. We even have something in the bill, we have third-party analysis of performance. KDE's checking on the schools, and somebody else in here is checking on KDE to make sure that it's being spent appropriately. So that's why we did it that way.
I guess maybe besides the actual cost and how we're doing it, are we calculating how many Tier 2 and 3 students we have and how many Tier 1 students we have? Is that how we've gotten to be able to come up with these calculations as far as how much we need now and how much we need for future years? I'm just wondering, if you have an influx of students, at some point this thing's going to need to be flexible on how much we're going to need per kid, essentially.
I'll jump into this a little bit and then let Mickey comment, but I'm on Appropriations and Revenue. So that fiscal note is based on year 3 and 4. So Katie, if this passes and if we get funding in this biennium, they will be attempting to set this program up over 2 years. And that ask in year 3 could change, and it's probably going to be totally based on the number of coaches that they have and the size of the program at that time. So it could be it may not even be in the $15 million level, but it might be at the $8 million, might be at the $10 million. But correct me if I'm wrong, but I think it's going to be the amount we ask for will totally be based on the number of coaches.
Okay, thank you. And then my final comments, as I'm listening to all of this, and I remember last year, I kind of jumped right in. I think this is one of the very first bills, as I recall, getting thrown at me, first, second, one of the early education committee meetings. And I was like, okay, I'm not sure I totally got this. And I dug in right after, as we were having our floor debate. It seemed like to me all the senators were it was either Read to Succeed versus RTA is what it was. And I thought,
I blame Senator Higdon for that.
Senator Higdon's fantastic, but I ended up, now I don't know, I didn't look at the vote history. I know I voted yes for both of them. And I thought maybe I was the only one that did that. I didn't see why they need to be mutually exclusive. And I'm very happy to see the progress this year in basically everything that I was thinking as this thing was developing. So I started researching, digging into it more this past year, and learning, not nearly enough yet, but getting there. And as I've kind of figured out, you always have a bell curve, right? And to me, Read to Achieve is going to catch that edge that will never get caught in the general populace, right? But the problem with it is if we've got 50% of the students underneath, that the bell curve should never be 50%. I mean, that's not a bell curve anymore. And so I see that there's a major gap in our basic literacy training, that we cannot continue down this path because our bell curve is like some kind of a weird spike somewhere. And we need to get more students into the main group again so that we can focus our intervention efforts on the kids who need interventions and not have 3/4 of students falling through the cracks and then trying to sweep them up with interventions later. So I'm very hopeful. I'm very thankful for the progress, I think, on this bill, particularly over this year. There's some little details I think we can shore up here and there as we go. But overall, I think we're in a good direction. Thank you.
Thank you.
Senator Meredith.
Senator West, this reminds me of the movie Groundhog Day. Here we are again. It's bringing back some very vivid memories. RTA is deeply embedded throughout my district. That's my concern about it. I remember vividly the floor discussion we had last year, and particularly change between Senator Neal and myself about how this operates. We've got to get beyond the importance of this. It's universal. We all know we have to do this, but it's how we get there. Yeah. And I used the description last year on the Senate floor when we were talking that, okay, we have RTA that's performing at this level, but we've got a whole group of kids that are at this level. And what it appeared to be at that time is we're going to take funding from this group to give to this group. We're going to bring these folks up here, but these folks are going to come down here. And I thought we left with the strong understanding we would not touch RTA. It's going to be separate and distinct. We're going to leave it alone like it is. But last fall, KDE changed the guidelines, changed the percentage of match that created havoc throughout my district. That those positions probably would not exist any longer, principally because they didn't have the funds for the match. And I was diametrically opposed to what we had talked about in the Senate, and I think probably the same discussion in the House. So my concern is not so much what your bill does, is what it possibly doesn't do. I'm not sure that I'm confident in the guardrails that are going to be there to truly protect our RTA. If KDA, in fact, changed the guidelines midstream that made it almost impossible for my schools to participate. If we're going to leave this program intact because we know it's successful, great, I'm with that. But I don't have confidence that turning this whole program over to KDA is going to assure that. So that's my concern. Can anybody address me and give me some assurances that that's not going to occur? Or possibly, do I need separate legislation that pulls RTA all together to build in those guardrails that I think we need?
this bill does not change the existing framework as it pertains to KDE and RTA. It's the same. It's the same as it was last year, the same as the year before. This does not affect that in any way. You could argue that the steering committee changes. We've talked about that, so that does change. But that working back and forth with KDE doesn't change. People have proposed, RTA is so successful, why don't we just put this money in RTA and get there that way? Well, it's because of the only two, as a farmer, there's two things that hold me back on the farm: time and money. There's the main two things that hold me back. To get the same result, to cover those 200,000 kids with RTA, you only have to come up with $300 million. So this is a way we can fill that gap. We can put 30 million in that space and hopefully reach the 200,000 kids rather than through the RTA model. But we've done everything we can possibly do to not affect RTA with this bill. And I can't say anything more than that, really.
Mr. Chair, if I could,
Please
again, I
proceed.
thought we had that understanding last year, not so much you and I, but as a collective body, that RTA is good, it's a functioning program, it's successful, so let's leave it alone. But then KDA didn't do that. It actually tried to repurpose those funds to do what you're talking about doing in the future.
I can't speak for, I'll let Mickey speak for Katie.
Thank you, Senator Meredith. First, I do want to assure you that we were analyzing the data, just as you all have done, and in thinking about the fiscal year 22 request for application, we did consider how we could, knowing that this is not an assurance, that we would not have additional funding to potentially be able to promote support beyond the professional learning supports that are provided in the RTA grant. We considered how we could allow flexibility and better align to statute. So when we were looking at the revision to the request for application, we adamantly believed we were aligning to the intent of the statute. We were still allowing for the salary to go to the interventionist. We support intervention. We support one-on-one instruction. We support small group instruction. But to your point, we did hear from the field. We made an amendment to the RFA and ensured that there are no funding allocations. So in the past, schools typically use the entire amount for salary of funding that interventionist. And we were hoping that they would be able to utilize local funds to still allow for partial use of the base funds for the salary of that interventionist with local funds, and then provide other supports to additional interventionists and teachers who were teaching students to read, utilizing some of the other funding base. But again, I feel that we were responsive as an agency to the public, to those concerns that were expressed, and now it has gone back to allowing for flexibility in the local schools to utilize both the base and the matching funds as they see fit.
Mr. Chair, may I respond?
Very briefly, please.
If KDA was so committed to that position, why did you reverse position?
I think because we have a responsibility as a service agency to the educators in our state to hear their voices. And while we were making decisions based on the data, we also have a responsibility to respond to their need. And when we overwhelmingly heard their need, we felt we needed to make the adjustment.
Well, again, that need hasn't changed. And again, if we leave RTA alone, I'm fine with it, but again, I don't think there's anything in this bill, and maybe it doesn't need to be there, Central West. Maybe we need a separate bill to provide that level of commitment and protection to those funds. So I appreciate your testimony, appreciate your time. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
And Senator Meredith, to your concern, a House bill has been filed to do exactly what you're asking to do. I'm happy to talk to you offline after the meeting with more details of a House bill that does what you're wanting to do. We have one more member I have with questions. We have about 20 minutes or we will lose members from this committee. Senator Denise Harper Angel.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Senator West, I believe you mentioned earlier that the training program is an opt-in. Is that an opt-in by the school, which would automatically include the teachers, or is it an individual teacher have the ability to opt in?
I believe it'd be on the school level, I believe. Is that correct?
Well, we would encourage them to join together as a PLC group, as a professional learning community, as a grade level team. But if there is one teacher who would like to have the professional learning support, we would encourage them to apply. For sustainability and for administrator support, it would be most effective within a team of teachers, but I would never want a teacher who is interested in having a professional learning opportunity to not be able to do so if that's not a full school building participating in that professional learning.
Follow up, Mr. Chairman.
Please.
So how does that affect a teacher if the school opts in and the teacher doesn't want to opt in?
So if the teacher doesn't want to opt in, they would not complete the application.
Our schools have been clamoring for more and higher level professional development. This bill helps provide that with early literacy. It's free, and as far as the schools are going to want to do this. This is additional helps. This is high level professional development, high level coaching. Another thing it does is we have teachers who have a certain salary level. This is another area of improvement or achievement that they can shoot for. So, for instance, once the coaching model's set up and you hire these coaches are probably going to be making a higher salary than an existing rank and file teacher would. So it'll give them another goal. Maybe if they one day want to become a coach, and that's another, so we can keep putting an incentive in for teachers to improve and expand their professional development, their professional lives, really.
Thank you, Senator. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Senator Thomas.
Senator West, I have to tell you that I'm conflicted on this because I do know how hard you and Representative Tipton have worked on this bill. And I do know both of your passion for education. I've worked with you personally, and both of you all are good men. But statutory language means something. It's really important. And my questions in reading this bill go along the lines of Senator Higdon's. I find the statutory language conflicting here. And that's why I'm really struggling with my support in this bill. And I'll give you an example. Okay. First of all, on Section 5 of this bill, subparagraph 2, page 17, beginning with line 22. Let me know when you're there.
I'm there.
Okay.
I'm there.
Paragraph 2 reads, the current law says the Reading, Diagnostic, and Intervention Fund is created. It creates this Reading and Diagnostic Intervention Fund, these grants that we talked about, to help teachers and library media specialists improve the skills of struggling readers in the primary program. That's the current language now. That's the law now. Okay. You change that to say that fund's created to help struggling readers in kindergarten through grade 3. Okay. So you create the fund. Okay. But then, if you go on page 22, section 6, lines 22 and 23, you delete the fund. You delete what you just created. Then again, as Senator Higdon so appropriately pointed out about now seems like a half an hour ago, you delete the grant applications under section 6 on page 22, lines 10 through 12.
Senator Thomas, we lost you on page 22.
Page 22, I'm
Where
on
do you-
page 22.
where are you seeing that we
This is Senator
eliminate?
Higdon's point, okay? Page 22, beginning on line 10. You deleted line 10 through line 12. You delete the grant application, page 22, lines 10 through 12. Okay. You delete the grant application reference there as well. Okay. Then again, what wasn't picked up, with me on page 23, now we're in section 7, subparagraph B, beginning with line 8 through line 10, page 23, paragraph B, lines 8 through 10, you delete the Reading Diagnostic and Intervention Grant Program established in KRS 158.7792 there. So it's deleted 3 times after you have created it. Okay.
If
Then,
I could jump in, Senator
Sure,
Thomas,
please.
this does not eliminate the program. It simply says that Section B starts out providing advice to the Kentucky Board of Education regarding the current language is the Reading Diagnostic and Intervention Grant Program. It now says evidence-based comprehensive reading instruction. And the reason we had to do that is that steering committee now includes both the RTA and the Read to Succeed program. Okay. So that steering committee, if we left it the same, then they cannot provide advice on the Read to Succeed program. But this is just providing advice about the program. It's not in any way eliminating the program.
but on page 20, you just highlighted my confusion here, because on page 20, on section 6, you create the Reading Diagnostic and Intervention Grant Steering Committee. You create that right there. You say clearly we're going to have this committee.
That
Page 20.
That was existing.
Pardon?
That was existing language.
Right. Okay, so it still exists, and yet the committee's authority seems to be taken away by virtue of the elimination of the Reading Diagnostic and Intervention Grant Program that's established in KRS 15792 presently, but now you're deleting that on page 23.
What we've done is rather than have the Reading Diagnostic and Intervention Grant Steering Committee handle just the RTA, it is now responsible for handling the RTA and the Read to Succeed program.
Okay.
And we add language to say it also includes universal screeners, reading diagnostic assessments, and a statewide professional development program for early literacy. So that committee would be responsible for all that. It's really enhanced responsibilities, really.
Okay.
Amanda, if you had
And also in section 7, it is referring to CCLD's responsibilities. And so that is just aligning what the center, how they support the committee that has been restructured. And so before they gave specific advice on the grant program alone, and because where they've expanded this, it also has expanded the evidence-based comprehension research or reading instruction and other matters relating to reading to expand the advice that CCLD provides technical service to. So that's where that section 7, so that's actually in reference to CCLD and how they'll provide support to KDE and the committee. I don't know if that's helpful or not.
Mr. Chairman,
Sir.
motion on the bill.
We do have a motion on the bill. Second. We have a second. Mariah, if you would, please call the roll.
Senator Carroll, Senator Givens, Senator Harper Angel.
Explain my vote, Mr. Chairman.
Please proceed.
Mr. Chairman, I'm going to vote yes today so that we can move the bill forward. I think there's a lot of good language in it. I just want to become a little more clear that there's not an additional burden on our teachers, that it's not another onerous burden, state mandate that we're applying, and that there can be no retribution against a teacher that doesn't want to opt into the program. And maybe we can talk offline on those issues. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you.
Senator Higdon.
Explain my I vote.
Please proceed.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I vote aye, and this is too important not to succeed. And but still have some questions. We can have some offline conversations and try to get them squared away. But thank you.
Senator Kerr, Senator Meredith.
Explain my I vote, please.
Please proceed.
I certainly understand the importance of bill, always have, and want to see it move forward. But I would hope we could have some conversation about the issues that I've discussed, and the pending legislation may be in the House, and I certainly want to reserve the right to vote no on the Senate floor. Thank you.
Senator Neal.
I'd like to explain my I vote.
Please proceed.
Actually, I appreciate the focus of this. I appreciate the movement from the focus, the way it was structured last year to how it is now. There are some questions that are outstanding. I asked some general questions of which you responded to that gave me some comfort. But like others on this particular panel and others that will be voting on this on the floor, certainly we'd want to get more information, more clarity on some of these issues. But thank you for your presentation.
Thank you.
Senator Southworth,
Explain my vote, Mr. Chairman.
Please proceed.
I'm going to vote yes. And I am interested, though, in helping support other of these little cleanup type things. The concerns that may have their home in another House bill, I shared those same concerns and was thinking myself, maybe it doesn't really belong in this bill. This bill's a good bill. There are other items out there that are also potentially needed. In KDE choosing to change purpose of the funds, we might get spread too thinly. If we have this other program, maybe we can, that'll help us, enhance all of these efforts and make sure that doesn't end up getting spread too thin and heavy in one direction and not the other. And then also, I do have concerns sometimes about the intricacies of the language and what Senator Higdon and Senator Thomas were just bringing up. So I would love to see that get cleaned up if it can be, if it needs to be. Thank you.
Senator Stivers, Senator Thomas,
Mr. Chair, I'd like to explain my I vote.
Please proceed.
Okay. Senator West, as I mentioned, I know how hard you and Representative Tipton worked on this, and you are right. We do need to focus on literacy. As you know, I've been a strong advocate for universal pre-K. Looks like we're going to move in that direction. We need to get our children reading early, because as I've said many times, the achievement gap begins before they get to school. Okay, yeah. The testing is just a reflection of what happened before they got to school. Okay, so I applaud your effort. I want to move forward on this, but I do think the language needs to be cleaned up, because it is conflicting, because it gives on one hand and takes away on the other. And I thought I would never say this, but I think a Senate committee substitute is really in order here. We really need to go back and re-look at the language and clean it up so that it's consistent throughout. But I do vote aye at the present time.
Thank you.
Senator West,
Aye.
Senator Wilson,
Aye.
Chair Wise.
Aye, by a vote to 11-0, Senate Bill 9 passes. Senator West, I encourage you, the members who do still have questions, as you always do.
So is
please
it
continue
available
this
for consent,
conversation.
Mr. Chairman? I'm just joking. Just joking.
Thank you so much. We are adjourned. Thank you all.